Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast here at the U.S. Cyber Range, NextGen Cyber, the future of cybersecurity. This is where we explore cutting-edge trends, emerging technologies, and the future of cybersecurity careers, featuring thought leaders, researchers, and educators from across the field. Today, we are joined with Pat McShea, Program Manager for Cyber Mission Operations with CACI. He started his career learning signals intelligence and riding submarines in the U.S. Navy as a cryptologist. He then learned all about satellites, spending 10 years supporting the National Reconnaissance Office. He took a pivot outside of the intel community with America Online, where he learned all about software development and performance measurement. He spent several years back in the intel community as a professional consultant, where his team was responsible for delivering data-driven analytics on large systems to inform acquisition strategies. Now, for the past 9 years, those have been focused on the full spectrum of cyber engineering. Pat, welcome to our podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Oh, thanks very much. Thanks for having me. With that billing, I feel, inferiority complex immediately kicks in, but I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to share whatever I can to help you and industry and anyone who's listening think through where they might fit into the cybersecurity world.
Yeah, absolutely. Today's whole conversation, kind of high level, is going to point towards cybersecurity careers and the challenges you face, the successes you have seen. And we're really hoping that maybe some of our students, some of our professors who use the cyber range will hear from someone like yourself in industry, and who I loved your introduction. You've been in so many different areas. You can really kind of dive deep and be like, hey, this is what you need to do. And if you just do X, it's going to really help you propel your career. And with that, I kind of want to talk maybe first about industry demands and talk about what the most critical skills, qualifications that companies like CACI are currently looking for when they are looking over those resumes from cybersecurity graduates.
Sure. Certainly for me, being well-rounded is more important than any one skill. And coming out of college, it's hard to tell a rising senior, oh, make sure you check these 3 boxes because we will absolutely need those, because that's not usually the case. I think we don't generally expect someone graduating from college to just plug in and become a highly productive employee on day one. So then what's your starting point? I think what I find in most important to young people in the cybersecurity fields is the platform of knowledge they obtain through their course studies. But then I guess the aptitude and attitude are the driving factors for success for me. So having that attitude, the can do, I'll jump in and I'll work on whatever you need me to. That isn't exactly what I learned in college, whatever. But I have a high aptitude. I'm willing to learn. So I tell people this quite a bit. We don't necessarily, it's not necessarily what you learn, it's that you learn, and that you're capable of absorbing new things and incorporating it into your tool belt or whatever. So the things that are developed in school environments, not necessarily in the classroom, but the extracurricular activities as well, where kids can grow, learn, and be forced to think. So you can, and I certainly wouldn't label anybody this way, but you could go through college and just take courses and just get grades. But if you do the extracurricular things, you are maybe forced to think without the pressure of, oh, I'm going to get an 85 on this instead of a 95, and then I'm going to get a B instead of an A. No, this is, like cybersecurity clubs, things like that, extra participation. It brings your foundation to the surface, and then it couples that with your ability to think and reason and problem solve.
You had mentioned, of course, people aren't, a student or a recent graduate, I should say, won't show up the first day and have all the skills and know how to do all the things. But, and maybe you've kind of answered this in a way, but what are the gaps that you see when a student walks in the door with the knowledge they're bringing from the classroom to what's actually needed on the job?
To me, I personally think the gap is the soft skills. But it's not the only gap, and it's highly dependent on, your workforce's needs, the problems you're trying to solve. But if you could broad brush it, I think the gap in soft skills is more prevalent than any one technical talent or skill. what I often call when I lecture kids on this, I do some lectures, your ability to interact with adults. So having the confidence to contribute thoughtful approaches in an analytical problem solving or troubleshooting manner. Hey, you're the new person. You're just out of college and you're working with somebody that's been in the workforce for 10 years. That doesn't mean you have less to offer. But then the soft skills part of that is, well, how do I express my opinions, or I have a unique way of solving this problem that, might or might not work. And then I have the confidence to express myself and articulate my thoughts. I have the confidence to be wrong once in a while as well. So, hey, I can put something out there. It might be the wrong answer. I hate to use that, but exactly. But you know what I mean? Saying the wrong thing, well, it might foster the conversation that leads us to the right thing. So that is a confidence thing. It's a soft skills thing. I think a lot of the younger, I'll say kids, students, they don't have the confidence yet, mostly. And that's to be understood. I'm sure I didn't when I was 19, 20 years old either.
Right.
But being well-rounded is important. And I think soft skills are ubiquitous and translate in any job setting. You could be a farmer, a plumber, an electrician, a cybersecurity engineer, and I think having good soft skills will carry the day in most settings.
I think that is so perfect, because when you talk about evolving skill sets, there are the introduction of AI, there's new threats and technologies that are emerging, but those soft skills remain the same. You always need to know how to communicate and connect to people. But along those lines of the new threats and the evolving skill sets, talk a little bit about how those required skills have evolved and pivoted as new technologies emerge, as new, unfortunately, threats emerge.
Okay. Well, so for me, I guess answering this question specifically can be a little tough, at least in my head. And I say that because the emerging threats, the fact that technology evolves so quickly is important. Predicting what's going to be next, especially beyond the short term, it can be difficult if you get down to something very precise. So I think it's hard to predict in the cybersecurity landscape, like in terms of tomorrow, what's going to happen tomorrow, predicting that today. An analytic problem solving mindset, natural curiosity, and drive. Those to me are the building blocks on top of the technical foundation that students acquire in college. Those are some of the enablers. That's how I think of them, to help students achieve early and sustained success as they launch their careers. So I guess that's how your question makes me.
Yeah. Well, and it kind of goes back to the soft skills. I mean, it just really points to and I always tell people, because I don't know why, I feel like the word soft somehow brings a scowl to people's faces sometimes, like, oh, soft. So I always tell people they're necessary skills. I'm like, if that makes people feel better, soft skills are necessary.
So, well, it's funny. I do a soft skills lecture, and I kind of change it up every time, but I've done it at different colleges. I just did one at George Mason a few weeks ago, and I was surprised that we do a various brown bag or after hours talks with their club, their Mason CC club. And the first one they wanted this year was soft skills. We go up to Morgan State and from a diversity perspective, HBCUs, we want to cast a wide net and welcome people into this community. Again, soft skills. Mm-hmm. You're going to learn software engineering or systems administration. You're going to learn that stuff in college. We want to bridge the gap, right? And make sure you're also a well-rounded individual who feels comfortable jumping into the workplace.
So I know you're going to be like, Becky, stop pulling me back to technical, but I'm going to do it one more time.
All good. All good.
Because I 100% agree with you. I think those soft skills are so very necessary across the board in all industries. But if someone was like, okay, I just need facts. I'm a student and I need data, or a data-driven person. What technical skills or certifications do you think universities should prioritize to make their graduates more competitive? And of course, we here are at the US Cyber Range, the Virginia Cyber Range, feel quite confident in what we're doing and getting people that hands-on experience. But talk a little bit in a broader sense, and maybe that's a part of it, of what a student needs to come to you with.
So I guess first I would say I I personally, I'm not sure I'm the authority on this one, partly because I have my views, but there are a lot of different people from a lot of different, I'll say, walks of life, but solving a lot of different problems, working in a lot of different environments, and their answers might be different than mine. Um, I don't think, like, from a student perspective, I certainly wouldn't advise students to go too deep here with things like SANS courses or advanced certifications, just because they're great, but they're also really expensive and oftentimes very specific. And if that's your passion, if I want to learn about reverse engineering and there's this, multi-thousand-dollar course on reverse engineering that I just have to do, and that, that's your calling, that's fine, that's great. But if not, I would recommend to people that they save their resources there, and it's not that important to get that level of detail coming out of college, certainly. So while these represent great learning opportunities, I'm not knocking them at all.
Mhm.
Our employees go through these programs, these certifications all the time. But I think students coming into the workforce might benefit from things like Linux Plus, Network Plus, certainly Network Plus. Hey, understanding how packets flow, understanding how networks work. It's a basic core skill that everyone in this community, nearly everyone, probably would benefit from. As opposed to, like, I'm going to get my GX Pen cert or my OSCP. Those are great certifications. You are an advanced cyber security person if you have that cert. But coming out of college, we don't expect that. So I base that answer on the cost investment side of things. And a lot of kids in college, if you put the pressure on yourself to drop, $10,000 on a SANS course, that's not necessarily as important when you're just starting out.
From a higher ed perspective, and when I say higher ed, I'm talking about 4-year universities, 2-year community colleges. Maybe they're not quite higher ed, but continuing education that higher ed institutions might give somebody after they've graduated, maybe want to pivot in their career. But there's a lot of talk about experiential learning. Everyone loves experiential learning in higher ed and talking about it. You have people talk about the importance of theory and liberal arts and ensuring you have that critical thinking capacity. And I feel like there's a puzzle where all those pieces are so very necessary. But I wanted to know what your thoughts were. And if you have these, as a student comes in to CACI, and I don't know how often you have direct contact the moment someone walks in the door. But when you see that, talk about the hands-on experience. And, you hear about capture the flag competitions or lab-based training. Do you see a difference from those students to maybe a student who hasn't had that hands-on experience, or how important is that?
This is a great question. So in my opinion, hands-on experience is irreplaceable. It is the foot stomp. The way that you differentiate yourself if you're a young person just starting out without a lot of experiences. A lot of people have high GPAs and have completed their cybersecurity curriculum or whatever. I will always ask kids, what are you doing on the side? What else? How are you spending your time? And then, do you have a home lab? Do you play around? Do you tinker with things? And a home lab might be as simple as an old laptop that my older brother handed down to me. It could be something that simple. But if you can take what you learn in class and apply it to problem solve as part of a team working across a set of challenges in a CTF environment, for example, you're forcing yourself to think and learn. And learn by, I should say, think and learn from others in your group, which that's work. That's the workplace. We don't all come in as experts who are automatons and just work on our one thing and don't interact with others. You benefit from the people around you. And then a couple of years later, you find yourself, hey, wait a minute, somebody else is benefiting from me. It's this pay it forward model, I guess. But yeah, so when I interview candidates, I always ask them what they're doing in their spare time. And I think from an interview perspective, especially with a person newer to the workforce who's maybe not so comfortable interviewing with an adult, I'm a few years older than many of these students, I'll just say. They look at me like their parent or their uncle, and maybe that's intimidating. Like, oh my gosh, what does this guy want from me? What am I supposed to say? What am I not supposed to say? So I think asking what they do in their spare time for a student puts them in their comfort zone, and then they kind of, the barrier breaks down. I don't judge anybody on their nervousness in an interview.
Right.
I would just as soon do whatever I can to eliminate that so that I can get a sense of who you are,
Mhm.
uh, and what makes you tick. So college kids who don't have much work experience, getting them into their comfort zone. Uh, so if I can talk about this hands-on experience, capture the flag, participation, cybersecurity clubs, labs, that's a great way to get through a conversation and figure out how somebody thinks, where they might be best able to contribute. Um, and at the same time, there's another part to this that is, I think, especially again, people more junior in the workforce don't realize this. As much as we're looking at them saying, "Can this kid do this job?" I hope they're looking at me saying, "Do I want to work for this guy?" And so if I get them talking like that, I myself am also removing some barriers and just kind of telling them, well, here's what it's like working here, and here's what I would hope you're good at, and maybe you could grow into this. And then they might listen to that and say, huh, this sounds like a pretty good environment. And trust me, you probably know this yourself. The people you work with are far more important than the work itself, because you can do. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. The people
Yeah.
you work with are far more important.
Yes, I understand. I, like you, am also a little older than the current college graduates. And so, yes, after 30 years in the workforce, that is everything, your
Yeah.
culture and the people around you. Just talk a little bit too about the ways that practical platforms like the US Cyber Range help bridge that gap between you kind of need something that brings you from academic knowledge over to real world application, and do things like the range. How do they help that?
Instrumental. Just like the hands-on experience is irreplaceable, the resources like the cyber range are, in my opinion, instrumental enablers for learning beyond the classroom. We have participated with the U.S. Cyber Range or the Virginia Cyber Range in a few different events. I just find it to be a fantastic resource for learning. Platforms like this enable students to put their learning into action. I went to class all day, every day this week. I learned more about network security or monitoring or threat hunting or whatever. Now I'm going to get to go play. I'm going to figure out I'm going to do some trial and error and try and solve some of these problems. I'm going to collaborate with my friends. We're going to make fun of each other. We're going to learn from each other. We're going to develop skills. I was slower than the person on that team, but I got there. That gives me confidence to do a little better next time. So learning in a competitive but fun environment. The competitive aspect has to be there, but in my opinion, but the winning part doesn't have to be there. It's just pushing yourself and being driven to solve problems, and so platforms like the U.S. Cyber Range are perfect. The other thing that I think, I don't know how you guys do it, to tell you the truth. From a funding perspective, it's like a gift. So these colleges, especially like when I go to Cyber Fusion down at BMI every year, seeing the disparity in the kids from different schools with different economic backgrounds, different, 2-year college, 4-year college, resources available to them. Well, the cyber range levels the playing field, because, hey, we're all going to come here and we're all going to compete on the same things. And we're giving this to you. It's a resource that's available to you as a participant in, your cyber club or whatever. And it's just I think a lot of universities might, I imagine from a budget perspective, every college or university can't have their own cyber range. So having one U.S. cyber range, it's a force multiplier for all those academic institutions and students and employers to benefit from those kids learning in that environment.
Absolutely. And let's flip it too. Let's talk about the employers, kind of flip the narrative about the biggest challenges that companies are facing today when it comes to hiring those qualified cybersecurity talent, and how educational institutions can better support that pipeline of skilled professionals so that you get what you need.
Well, I guess for me, I would put an immediate plug in for the Commonwealth Cyber Initiative. And I'm not a paid sponsor or anything. I just think it's such a fantastic idea. When we first heard about this a few years ago, I was dumbfounded, like, wow, this is so cool. And then we went to our first event, like, this is real. So that's the first thing I think about when I hear this question. What a great concept. Link all the higher learning institutions and their cybersecurity students together to collectively grow our skill sets in this field. And I say our skill sets. That's our nation, our company, whatever you want to call it. But in my view, a downside to that is it's not. I don't know if a downside might sound too negative, but the lack of industry investment and participation. I might be wrong. I just from what I've seen, it's like, gee, there aren't as many industry sponsors as there are academic institutions. All the academic institutions are all in. It seems like to me in the state of Virginia for CCI. I'm sorry, I'm giving this answer so narrowly in the Virginia sense.
Oh, that's good.
So it's not that the industry participation is non-existent, but there are a lot of companies that would benefit from tapping into this resource pool for pipelining future cybersecurity engineers into the workforce. Such a wide variety of skill sets, backgrounds, interests. You put a couple of hundred kids in a room and they're all interested in cybersecurity, and they're willing to take a weekend off from whatever else they might be doing and throw themselves into cybersecurity challenges. That says something about all those kids right there. So whereas things like holding job fairs on campuses, that's kind of push button. This is a hyper focused sub community of cybersecurity engineers, and investing some of your time as a corporate entity or a government entity, I think is just it's not quite as far along in my view. Those who run the CCI might say otherwise. Oh no, I know Microsoft has gotten big into it. CACI has been big into it for a few years, and there are a few others, but there are dozens, hundreds of companies out there, big and small, that could make minimal investments and probably tap into this community and help these kids grow their skills. So I guess that's my answer.
And a wonderful answer it is. Okay. I want to actually, I love it. And I want to talk about that and narrow it in, kind of circling back to what you mentioned earlier about soft skills being those necessary skills, and talk about what it is that you see and maybe tips on how to evolve those problem-solving skills to help some of these students. To your point, there's some high pressure moments and they need to be able to communicate. They need to be able to talk with their colleagues around them. They need to be confident to share their thoughts, whether they're kind of quote unquote wrong or right. It's like you said, it's not really wrong or failure. It's a learning, and it will evolve to get to where you need to go. But I would gather you work in some high pressure situations and cyber attack situations. How do you prepare a student for that?
You do. So, well, first I would say, it's the most important ability. I know we talk about soft skills as the gap, but problem solving, remaining calm under fire, so to speak, those are just irreplaceable. Not everybody's good at it, and everybody doesn't have to be great at it, certainly. This type of mindset, or I'm trying to think of the right word, having this ingrained in you, it doesn't just happen overnight. It takes practice and it can be learned. In my case, I gave this question. I'm giving this question some thought, I should say. I think my own experience, I happen to always have been very calm under fire. I don't know why. I think it's because of my dad. My dad, a school teacher, very good on his feet. Oldest of 7, Depression era. Maybe that had something to do with it. It's kind of been a family joke among my brothers and I that we all seem to have this one trait that we're kind of unflappable. I was probably good in that environment at an earlier age than some, not all, just some. And then others might develop that skill over time. It's certainly experience, and it is a learned skill. So participating in your competitive cyber club, coming to events hosted by the U.S. Cyber Range. These types of activities, in my opinion, might acclimate cybersecurity students to the workforce better. The problem solving, the clock is on. We're counting down. You're 100 points behind the leading team. It's not life and death. It's just competitive pressure that maybe simulates what a work experience would be like.
Along those lines and on the technical side as well, do you see any educational trends emerging and maybe platforms like the range or, the CTF, of competitions or really the trends that are really catching on? But is there anything else that I'm missing or that you have seen from the career side that really helps students get career ready for cybersecurity?
Well, it might be the same answer over again. I hope not. But in my opinion, the hands-on and practical exercises are more important than ever. But to be fair, not knocking curriculum and formal education, they're the book learning, tests, et cetera. Those are the foundation. And I think the practical hands-on type things are the building blocks that get you one level beyond just learning. I use this example where, like, learning how to write code. I tried that many years ago because I thought that's what I wanted to do. After a couple of Pascal classes, probably dated myself by saying that, I realized it wasn't for me. And how I knew it wasn't for me was I can learn it, but it's not natural to me. And it just, so you can learn things, they might not be natural to you, but repetition might make it become more natural to you. But in that case, it also wasn't my calling. So I didn't, I don't lose any sleep over the fact that I think at writing code. I don't write code. But getting someone career ready, it is the reason people go to college, right? Mm-hmm. And so the foundation of curriculum, studies, books, tests, things like that are important. But the hands-on projects, spare time, commitment, extracurricular things, I think is the amplifying, enabler.
Looking ahead too at the future of cybersecurity careers, obviously cybersecurity threats constantly evolving. AI is adding a whole new fun layer to everything. And who knows what's going to come out in 5 to 10 years. We don't even know. It's going to be an adventure. But talk about the demand for cybersecurity professionals as we move into the future. Growing, how do you keep it? We already have a hiring gap. How do we fill that? Give me your thoughts.
I missed part of your question. I'm trying to follow along. Can you repeat that one?
Yes, I absolutely can. Just talking about cybersecurity threats constantly evolving. And again, AI is adding an extra layer. And in 5 to 10 years from now, we don't even know what you don't know. You don't know what's coming in 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
So the demand for cybersecurity professionals, I have no doubt will be rising. But what are your thoughts on that?
So this is I know why I stumbled on this one the first time. It's a hard one to predict for me, and we're all wired differently. I do think I have some strategic thought process in my brain, but thinking 5 to 10 years out for me is hard because it's hard to know. It's hard to think 6 months out. Like to predict accurately 6 months, a year from now. What did we not see coming that happened? And oh wow, we gotta shore up that hole, or here's a new technology we didn't see. But certainly application of generative AI in the cybersecurity space, that's one answer, but that might be a little trite. Oh, AI, everybody can pull that one out and say, oh, AI, but that's okay. I think applying, we have a couple projects that we're doing right now with AI-based solutions, I guess. But just learning various large language models and whatever is great, but applying those to real world problems and trial and error, experimentation, you can't go wrong by investing some time and effort into that space. But for me personally, I would feel not the expert at telling you in 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
But where that is, I do think back to the soft skills thing, no matter what the technology and threats are of 5 to 10 years, having the soft skills, the ability to work in a team, the ability to solve problems, that's ubiquitous. That's not going to go away. So that's always going to be a foundation. I think that's been a foundation throughout time and across industries, right? So
yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think, a lot of people talk about future proofing their curriculum because it's so ever changing. And I think that's the answer right there. What you just said, soft skills and problem solving skills. It's ubiquitous. It's needed now. It's needed you do have the crystal ball for that. And that is needed to future
Yeah.
proof their curriculum. Talk about partnerships with industry, because a lot of times the conversation, and even right now during our conversation, we talk about higher ed in this bucket. We talk about corporate, industry, government, anyone who does the hiring in this bucket. How do we bridge those two maybe sooner? So we're not like, okay, student now and employee later, and you figure out the bridge in between. How could we as higher education institutes and we as companies and government entities like CACI collaborate more effectively to create that continuous feedback loop? Any ideas?
Uh, well, I don't know that I have an answer to that one that scales necessarily well, but we all have a responsibility in our little corner of the world, right? And we can do this. It's a tough one for me because I'm not sure. Like I think you mentioned curriculum in that question. Um, I don't know for all the participation that we do as a company or that I do personally. I don't know that what I do influences curriculum development per se. Um, Maybe we should be, I don't know. And it's something we haven't put a lot of mental energy into, at least yet. But like when I go back to like my little corner of the world, if I can clean up my little corner of the world, I look at it as, we typically hire around 10 cybersecurity interns every summer. I'm always surprised, pleased, and even amused to see the interns in action. I talk directly, I try to get in there and participate with them and get to know them a little bit, so that by the end of the summer, hopefully they're at least calling me by my first name. Uh, Not into, it's just, it's important, but learn from them what they're learning from us. And then this summer we had like a development heavy project with agile sprints, daily stand-ups, et cetera, things that we in the workforce take for granted. I was a little surprised, but maybe I shouldn't have been, I guess, to see that the interns who had coding skills and taking comp sci classes, things like that, none of them, I don't think, had any experience with the work tempo, the deliverables, the daily stand-ups, the sprint planning, all those things. So I just thought to myself, you know, that's so cool. They are learning the coding. We're going to teach them how work happens, and the tempo. And then we got such good feedback from a couple of them on, I think we had one that was more of a DevOps workflow, and the kids just had not touched that. And I think of it as, oh, that's a modern thing, but it's not new. I would think that schools would teach that, and maybe they do, but the students we had this summer were not exposed to that. So the feedback loop for me is we always want to pick internship projects that are interesting for the kids, but that also stretch their minds, push them a little bit. And so then when I learned something as simple as, oh, you've never worked in an agile stand-up or agile scrum environment where you have to stand up and talk about what you're doing every day and hold yourself accountable, oh, I didn't know that. But those kids go back to school and then they want to come back and intern for us the next year. And they give us insights into how that helped them the next year, how they ended up being a project lead on some, or a school project, that they had this confidence that they got out of a simple internship. So, like I said, that doesn't scale. Like that's not going to carry over to 1,000 universities across the entire United States. It's a few kids we had. Hopefully, they take it back to their schools, and it organically grows from there.
Before we wrap up our conversation, which by the way, Pat, I have so enjoyed. I have loved all
Yeah,
of
me
the
too.
information you have shared. Let's talk a little bit. Let's just kind of wrap up with your final thoughts, and you can kind of add in anything you maybe think we missed that you really want to get out there. But just talking about bridging that talent gap and advice for both students as well as the people, the instructors, the professors, the adjuncts, the people who are teaching them, because yes, the students need to know, okay, I am a student and I need to do X, Y, and Z to make myself hireable when I graduate. But there's also responsibility of the higher ed institutions and the professors and the cyber range to make sure that they're doing everything they can to ready these students.
Yeah.
I'll kind of give you the final word on that. Give me some thoughts on that.
So, two words, I guess: participate and collaborate. I hope that doesn't sound corny, but
No.
The collaboration that we see in the various events we go to throughout the year, it's so refreshing to see. Like if a bunch of teams from a bunch of different universities and junior colleges go to the same event and compete in the capture the flag, yes, they're competing, but there's that generation is different than my generation. I think they are so into the collaboration side of things, and there's not like a sports team rivalry where I hate my rival. They're all in it together, and they are generally, I think, they participate to learn and grow. So an example for me would be I look at a school like George Mason, and I use them as an example only because we've been sponsoring their Mason CC club for many years. They're very mature. They get great participation from their student body. I did a lecture over there just 2 weeks ago, I think, on a Friday night. At least 50 kids attended. I was shocked. I did it last fall. I did it. It was Good Friday. It was the day before Easter weekend, and there were 35 kids there. They're home on spring break, but somehow there are still 35 kids there. This time there were 50 or more. Anyhow, in a 1-hour session, there weren't a bunch of kids with their phones in their hands, not paying attention. I'll say everyone there. I don't know. I was pleasantly shocked. I was like, you guys are all here on a Friday night, and you're listening and you're engaging. And I ask questions, and we have a back and forth. We did a 1-hour session, and then we probably had about an hour of question and answer afterwards. So that was great to see. And then I will say not every school is like that, and it's not the school. It's just, hey, George Mason has a program that's pretty mature. They've been doing this for a long time. I think Mason CC has been around for more than 10 years. There are other teams and clubs that are further behind, but that participate and collaborate aspect, if it's, I'm not going to use any other names, just a University X or, whatever, is further behind. Don't let that dissuade you. You throw yourself in there, you learn from others, and the next year and the year after that, you're only going to grow. And maybe the students that come behind you 4 years later benefit from the club that you started or that you threw yourself into and up their game a little bit. So I would say for them, though, keep pushing. Don't let that hold you back. There's this other team over here that they've been doing it a long time and we're not going to win, so why bother? Like, no. And I actually say, while I say it that way, as I hear myself talking, I think most of them probably don't need to hear that because they're not there to win and at all costs, most of them. But I mean, I hope they're not. And so they're not discouraged, but I said, don't let that hold you back. The inferiority complex of, oh, I'm not as good as that team over there. I don't know what they know. I guess I'll just go home. No, there's a role for you. You keep pushing yourself. And the next thing you know, you're in the middle of it and you're participating and you're contributing and you're a valuable, cybersecurity engineer for some workforce entity that would only benefit from having you.
And I love simplicity. That is something I preach a lot of because it's memorable and it gives people an action item. And so participate and collaborate is a beautiful way, I think, to sum up this entire conversation. We shared a lot with students. We've shared a lot with any potential instructors and professors and whoever else in this whole spectrum. So just to say participate and collaborate. And then what does that mean to you? I think is perfect. Pat, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's enjoyable. I appreciate if anything I said helps someone else in their journey. Awesome.
I'm sure, I have no doubt, lots of what you said will help many students. So I appreciate your time because I know you're busy. You have a lot going on. Thanks to everyone else who is here listening to us. And again, that was Pat McShea, who we just spoke with, a program manager for cyber mission operations with CACI.